Taking a short diversion out of the park, we need to cast our minds back to the 19th century, when the evil of drink was demonised. Total abstinence became a way of life for teetotalers, and temperance halls sprung up all over England. This is Egbert People's Hall, the successor to one of those early temperance halls. In 1876, the Egbert Cocoa Rooms had been opened near the site as the temperance movement's answer to the public house. In the cocoa rooms, non-alcoholic drinks were sold cheaply and facilities were to be provided for reading and indoor games. Sounds a bit like the modern coffee shops of today, doesn't it? By 1898, the need for bigger premises was identified, and wealthy local businessman John Temple paid for this building in Egbert Vale, complete with a gymnasium and bowling green. The Egbert People's Hall, which he financed, compromises of 500 square yards on 3 floors and stands on an acre of land. The building has been undergoing refurbishment, and the aim is for it to have access onto Sefton Park itself. The atmosphere of the original building has been carefully preserved, but these days it includes a fully licensed bar. It is also available to hire for weddings and private functions. Before we leave the park, a mention of the most contentious issue in its recent history. The campaign by local residents opposing City Council plans to sell to house builders this green space known as Sefton Park Meadows. A decision on its future was expected as we shot this footage. These leafy lanes with their sandstone walls look quite ancient, but in fact most of the houses, schools and churches in Mossley Hill are relatively new additions to the landscape. The most impressive of these is Mossley Hill Parish Church, which stands on top of the hill and can be picked out as a landmark from as far away as the mountains of North Wales. Built between 1870 and 1880 and designed by Lancaster architects Paley and Austin, the church and vicarage cost £28,000, equivalent to 2.3 million at today's rates. Faced in red sandstone with ashlar dressings, it has a tile roof. It was financed with a bequest by merchant Matthew James Glenton and is designed in a late 13th century style. It is dedicated to St Matthew and St James. Planned in the shape of a crucifix, it has a tower at the crossing, a chancel with a north organ loft, a south chapel and an octagonal vestry. The tower has angled buttresses, a stair turret and clock faces on 3 sides. The majestic interior features a centre space under the Great Tower. Much of the stained glass was destroyed in the World War II. It was replaced by clear glass on the sides of the church and by stained glass in the east and west windows. The glass in the east window depicts the Apostles' Creed and in the west window Paradise Lost. The reredos has a canopy and a coloured carving of the upper room in Emmaus, which is a copy of a glass mosaic in Westminster Abbey. From Rose Lane, it is a short hop around the corner to Sudley House. Set in magnificent grounds, it is now a museum and art gallery open to the public 7 days a week. Known originally as plain Sudley, it was completed in 1824 for corn merchant and former Lord Mayor Nicholas Robinson. The identity of the original architect is disputed. Some authorities suggest that the original design was probably by John Whiteside Casson. However, National Museums Liverpool say that the name of the architect is unknown, although there are features that suggest it may have been the work of Thomas Harrison, a Yorkshire-born architect who drew his inspiration from ancient Rome. Shipping magnate George Holt bought the house in 1883 and began a programme to modify and extend his new home. It contains the collection of paintings and sculptures amassed by Holt, displayed in the original setting. Among the works on show are paintings by Gainsborough, Reynolds, Landseer, Millay and Turner. The house was bequeathed to the city of Liverpool by Holt's daughter, Emma Georgina Holt, in 1944 and is now managed by National Museums Liverpool. Sudley underwent £1 million refurbishment and reopened after 2 years in May 2007. The restoration included redecorating in the style of George Holt's era and modifying the first floor, where 3 new attractions were incorporated. This is Brodie Avenue, named after the forward-thinking city engineer John Alexander Brodie. He was the man who laid out the plans for the Liverpool's Ring Road Queen's Drive, the first dual carriageway in the UK. He also invented football goal nets. Used to this day around the world, they are the innovation of which Brodie said he was most proud, even although he designed the original Mersey Tunnel. Now we are deep in the heart of suburbia and heading for a school that was the seat of education of one of the city's most famous sons. Now known as Calderstone School, it was more famous as Quarrybank High School when John Lennon was among its pupils and set up his first band, the Quarrymen. Quarrybank High School was founded in 1921 and saw its first intake of 225 boys on the 11th of January 1922. The first headmaster was Old Etonian Mr. R.F. Bailey, who modelled the school on the regime of public schools. From the outset, the school set high standards and earned a reputation for academic excellence. John Lennon went to Quarrybank High School from September 1952, and it was here that John and his friends formed a rock band, calling themselves the Quarrymen. The name of the Quarrymen was taken not just from the school, but from the first line of the school song, which begins, "Quarrymen, old before our birth." In 1967, Quarrybank High Boys' School merged with neighbouring Calder High School for girls and Morrison School. It adopted the name Quarrybank Comprehensive School. In 1985, the school also merged with Egberth Vale High School, which operated on 4 separate sites since 1800. It was then that it adopted its current name, Calderstone School. A series of property disposals and a new building now sees the school housed on the original Calder House and Quarrybank sites. Less than a minute's walk away is Calderstones Park. We've all heard of Strawberry Fields, but Calderstones too was John Lennon's playground in his formative teenage years. Extending to 126 acres, Calderstones Park is popular with families. It also includes a number of different attractions, including a playground and a botanical garden. There is also a lake with geese and ducks overlooked by the Mansion House, which features a cafe and a children's play area. One of the park's most ancient features is the Allerton Oak. It is estimated to be more than 1,000 years old, and according to legend, the ancient local 100 court sat beneath its branches. Calderstone's house, its Georgian mansion, built in 1828 by lead shop manufacturer Joseph Need Walker. It was built in 1875 by co-founder of the Cunard Line, Charles McIver, whose family sold the house and grounds to the Corporation of Liverpool in 1902. The Reader organisation charity has now made the Mansion House its home and has secured investment to carry out a programme of restoration and improvement. But perhaps the park's greatest claim to fame are the Calderstones themselves. They are 6 sandstone boulders, which are the remains of a dolmen, a single-chamber Stone Age burial tomb, dating from around 10,000 years BC. The Calderstones were unearthed in 1825 when it was reported that clay urns were also found containing ashes and human bones. During the 19th century, some academics suggested the Calderstones were part of a Druid's henge circle, but it was later realised that the stones were a ruined burial monument. Close examination of markings on the stones show worn carvings, including spirals, concentric circles, arcs and footprints. Several of these carvings are similar to examples found in Anglesey and at a Neolithic burial site in Northern Ireland. The stones had been placed near the entrance to the estate, but were moved to the Harthill greenhouses in the 1950s to protect them from further weathering. John Lennon's route home would have taken him past or through Calderstones Park each day that he attended Quarrybank School. He would have often been seen along here, tree-lined Menlove Avenue, with a satchel of school books on his back. This was his destination. Built in the 1930s at number 251 Menlove Avenue is a 3-bedroom semi-detached house named Mendips. This became the Lennon's home when his mother Julia sent him to live with his Aunt Mimi at the age of 5 in July 1946. It is now a Grade 2 listed building owned by the National Trust, after Lennon's widow Yoko Ono bought the house and donated it to the Trust in 2002. Each year it attracts thousands of visitors around the world, although the number who can enter the property at any one time is strictly limited. Tune in next time to tour the streets of Liverpool, when we again explore some of the areas outside the city centre. We are taking a trip over the water to visit the Wirral Peninsula. But our route is under the water through the Thirst Birkenhead Tunnel, now named Queensway. At the time it was opened, this was the biggest municipal project ever undertaken, and at just over 2 miles, it was the longest road tunnel in the world. This was a title it held until 1948, when a longer one was opened in Spain. The first tunnel under the River Mersey had been built to carry the Mersey Railway in 1886. However, by the 1920s, there was growing concerns about the long queues of traffic waiting to cross the Mersey on car ferries. After much debate, it was decided that a road tunnel should be built, and work started in 1925 to a design by Sir Basil Mott, who worked with Liverpool city engineer John Brodie. The tunnel entrances, the original toll booths and ventilation buildings were designed by Liverpool architect Herbert James Rouse. More than 1.2 million tonnes of rock, gravel and clay were excavated, and some of it was used to build Otterspool Promenade. Of the 1,700 men who worked on the tunnel during the 9 years of construction, 17 were killed. It cost a total of £8 million to build and was opened on the 18th of July 1934 by King George V, with a crowd of more than 200,000 at the opening ceremony. The tunnel is also a tourist attraction, with visitors paying just £6 for a behind-the-scenes look at the engineering masterpiece. The guided tour is not for the faint-hearted, since there are a lot of steps to climb, but the effort is rewarded with visits to the ventilation stations with their giant fans. There is also a detailed explanation of how the tunnel was constructed and a visit to the original tunnel control room. Average daily traffic through the tunnel currently stands at 35,000 vehicles, which equates to just under 12.8 million journeys per year. The tunnel sees us emerge close to the heart of Birkenhead. The name of the town probably comes from a description of a headland overgrown with birch, referring to a thicket of birch trees which grew on the headland overlooking Woodside. For decades, the main activity was at Birkenhead Priory, a small community of monks who operated a ferry taking passengers in tiny sailing boats across the Mersey to Liverpool. It was not until the 19th century that the town started to grow. Following it, the establishment of shipbuilding, which started in 1829, and this was the business that eventually became the famous Camel Laird shipyard. Hamilton Square was designed by Edinburgh architect James Gillespie Graham and has the greatest number of Grade 1 listed buildings in a single scheme, second only to Trafalgar Square. Glasgow-born William Laird gave the square its name as a tribute to his mother-in-law Mary Hamilton. Dominating the square is Birkenhead Town Hall, which was built as the headquarters of the former county borough of Birkenhead in 1887. Designed by local architect Christopher Ellison, the building was constructed using Scottish granite and sandstone. It holds a council chamber, offices, a concert hall and function rooms. The clock tower stands 200 feet high and has 4 faces. After the abolition of Birkenhead Council in 1974, the building continued to be used as offices until the early 1990s, and it was later refurbished for use as the Wirral Museum. Since that was closed in 2010, the future of the Grade 2 listed building has remained uncertain, as Wirral Council would like to sell it. Woodside Ferry has a booking hall that dates from 1864 that remained virtually unaltered until it was extensively refurbished from 1985, with many of the submarine HMS Thetis. Birkenhead's first Member of Parliament, shipbuilder John Laird, is buried in the churchyard. We venture south beyond Birkenhead now, passing Camel Laird shipyard and along the New Ferry bypass. The Wirral takes its name from myrtle trees that were once common here. The name Wirral literally means myrtle corner, from the English word weir, meaning myrtle, and heel, a corner or slope. In the Domesday Book, the boundary of the Wirral Hundred is described as starting 2 arrow falls from Chester city walls. And this is Portsunlight, a model village that is regarded by many as the jewel in Wirral's crown. Work on Portsunlight began in 1888 after the Lever brothers bought the site to expand their soap-making business, which was then based in Warrington. The company bought 56 acres of land, a prime site between the river and a railway line. William Hesketh Lever, later Viscount Leverhulme, personally supervised planning the village and employed nearly 30 different architects. Between 1899 and 1914, 800 houses were built to house a population of 3,500. The garden village had allotments and public buildings, including the Lady Lever Art Gallery, a cottage hospital, schools, a concert hall, open-air swimming pool, a church and a temperance hotel. The cottage hospital, opened in 1907, was closed for many years but refurbished and reopened in 2008 as a luxurious Leverhulme hotel. In his time, Lever introduced welfare schemes and provided for the education and entertainment of his workforce, encouraging recreation and organisations which promoted art, literature, science and music. He regarded Portsunlight as an exercise in profit sharing with his workers, and so he invested heavily in the village where they were housed. Until the 1980s, all residents of Portsunlight were employees of Unilever and their families. During the decade, the houses were first sold privately. One of the great buildings he bestowed on Portsunlight is the Lady Lever Art Gallery, which he dedicated to the memory of his wife Elizabeth. A keen art collector, Lever travelled all over the world and wanted to share with his villagers and others the art he had collected. Opened in 1922 by Princess Beatrice, the art gallery shows Lever's collection of artwork, including a range of furniture, paintings, sculptures and ceramics. Today the gallery is operated by National Museums Liverpool. It regularly hosts special exhibitions by artists, including the likes of Turner, Sickert and Picasso, which draw visitors from all over the UK to Portsunlight. A new addition to Portsunlight is River Park. Merseyside's newest public park, it opened in 2014 on the banks of the River Mersey. River Park is an open natural space that has been created on the former landfill site at Bromborough Docks. The site was taken over by the Land Trust, a charity that is committed to the long-term, sustainable management of open space for community benefit. There are an array of walkways, wildflowers, wildlife and a wetland area for visitors to enjoy. It is picturesque in all seasons. Bromborough has its own potential claim to fame, as the site of one of the bloodiest battles fought in the Middle Ages. It is said that Bromborough was the site of the Battle of Brunanburg, when thousands died in clashes between Saxons and the Celts. The battle in 937 say that Saxon King Elthastan was the victor. It is said the battlefield could have been on the plain before Staunton Hill. But for many Liverpool viewers in parts of Liverpool and The Wirral, Staunton is important today for a different reason. It is the site for the Staunton relay mast, which beams the TV signal on tens of thousands of homes on Freeview. Heading north again, now we head towards the ancient village of Oxton. Another place mentioned in the Domesday Book, it is today a conservation area. Skirting Oxton, we enter Ball's Road. Interestingly named after Mr. James Ball, who lived in a house on the corner of nearby Palm Hill. Mr. Ball owned ferryboats that ran between Liverpool and Monk's Ferry. To distinguish his boat from many others, he had a large ball fitted to the tops of their masts. And in Ball's Road, we find the Williamson Art Gallery and Museum. Opened in 1928, it was named after its benefactors, is a single-storey classical building, mainly in red brick, with Corinthian columns and pilasters. It is not in the town centre, but in Oxton, and therefore convenient for the middle-class audience for which it was intended at the time. It is rather an unassuming building, but it contains 14 galleries and was designed without windows to maximise display space with discrete top lighting. It was advanced at the time it was built for the system of humidifiers in the galleries, which protect the works of art. The building was intended primarily as an art gallery, with the hope that money would later become available to extend and provide the museum more display space. The collections shown today include Oriental ceramics, West African wood carvings, Irish glass, and Cretan antiquities. Perhaps the most important works are connected directly to the Merseyside area. Local ceramics include a collection of Liverpool porcelain from the second half of the 18th century and the Della Robbia pottery. There is also the Maritime Gallery, opened in 1963, which brought models, pictures and artefacts from shipping lines and the Mersey ferries, along with a collection drawn from camel lairds. This area on the edges of Oxton and Claughton in the late 19th century was the site of great mansions, like Claughton Manor House. Built in about 1850 by local benefactor Sir William Jackson, with its gardens designed by Sir Joseph Paxton, it occupied a site between Egerton Road and Manor Hill until it was pulled down in the 1930s. One of the few surviving examples of these great mansions is Outwood. This building was for decades the residence of the Congregation of the Christian Brothers, the Roman Catholic teaching order established and ran St Anselm's College. The brothers purchased the house when it came on the market in 1933 and built their school in the extensive grounds. Outwood was built in 1863 by the Halsall Sedger, a prominent Liverpool corn merchant. The Sedgers, however, lived in the house for only 5 years, moving out because of Halsall's failing health. It was bought in 1872 by Joshua Heap, a rice and sugar merchant. Heap's Rice Hill warehouse still stands in Upper Parnell Street, Liverpool, where it's been converted into apartments. Many of the existing fine features of Outwood have been left intact during the brothers' occupation. After they left Outwood, it was bought by St Anselm's College Edmund Rice Trust and has been the subject of sensitive restoration, which is partly complete. Outwood House is now used to accommodate part of the sixth form at St Anselm's College, along with the college library and a small chapel. Birkenhead is twinned with the town of Latina in Italy, a new town built by Mussolini south of Rome. Perhaps Wirral might also think of twinning with New York. Not such a ridiculous idea, since it is said that Manhattan's famous Central Park was inspired by its predecessor in Birkenhead. In 1841, an improvement commission, part of Birkenhead's local government, proposed the idea of a municipal park. A private Act of Parliament allowed it to use public money to buy 226 acres of marshy grazing land on the western edge of Birkenhead. Plots of land on the edge of the proposed park were then sold off in order to finance its construction. Although some large houses and private villas were initially built by local merchants and wealthier business people, the long depression in the latter 19th century would mean that many plots remained undeveloped well into the early 20th century. The Improvement Commission chose Joseph Paxton to design the park and Edward Kemp as the works supervisor, because both had previously worked on redesigning the gardens at Chatsworth House. The park, which took 5 years to build, was designed to be natural and informal, rather than a structured, neatly arranged urban garden. During construction, hundreds of tons of stone and earth was moved to create well-drained terraces, hills, rockeries and lakes. Paxton planted numerous trees and shrubs at various places, so visitors would enjoy the surprise of unexpected views or hidden features as they wandered through the park. Buildings included the Swiss Bridge, a 23-foot pedestrian span built in 1847. It is unique as being the only covered bridge of traditional wooden construction in the United Kingdom. The grand entrance was built to look like a classical triumphal arch. As many as 10,000 people attended the official opening in 1847. The park became run down and neglected towards the end of the 20th century. Beginning in the late 2000s, it has undergone major restoration work. A purpose-built visitors centre has been installed, and there's been work done to restore its original buildings and bridges, as well as tidy up the lakes and parklands and unblock the drainage system. In 1850, American landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted arrived by ship in Liverpool. During his stay in northwest England, he paid a visit to Birkenhead Park along with several other public gardens. In 1858, Olmsted won a competition to design Central Park in New York and said he was influenced by the Paxton designs in Birkenhead. The park was designated a conservation area in 1977 and declared a Grade 1 listed landscape by English Heritage in 1995. Less inspiring architecturally is Birkenhead Market, which is at the centre of the town in the Grange shopping centre. Struggling to compete with changing shopping habits and out-of-town developments, there are draft proposals for reinventing the market for the modern era as a specialist destination. Birkenhead's original market was opened on what is now the site of the town hall on the 10th of July 1835. The land was donated by Francis Price and the building cost £4,400. The market was adequate for the town's then population of 2,569. But by 1841, the population had seen a dramatic growth to 8,223, necessitating the opening of another market on the 11th of July 1845. The council paid £8,154 for the land, with a further £23,000 being spent on what was then Europe's second largest market, St John's in Liverpool being the biggest. Michael Marks of Marks & Spencer opened one of his first 7 penny bazaar stalls here during the 1880s. Both splendid buildings, supposedly fireproof, came to the same end. The Crystal Palace caught fire in 1936 and Birkenhead Market first in 1969, then again on the 9th of November 1974. Birkenhead Market still boasts over 300 indoor and outdoor stalls, including 2 nationally acclaimed fishmongers. The movement of the old market clock, which was destroyed in the 1974 fire, was salvaged and is now the centrepiece of the new market, starting up again 157 years to the day after it first kept time. Here we are heading towards the heart of the town, along Leeds Street and onto New Quay. Leeds Street takes its name from the Leeds-Liverpool Canal, which originally ended in Old Hall Street. New Quay dates back to the early 17th century when Sir Edward Moore of Bankhall caused a new stone quay to be built along the riverbank to prevent erosion, along the route from his home to the city of Liverpool, where he served as mayor and later as an MP. George's Dock Gates takes its name from the entrance to the huge dock that once filled the area in front of St Nicholas's Church and Tower buildings, right along to Moore Street. Work on building it began in 1762 and was originally known as the New Dock and then North Dock. It was opened in 1771, having been designed and built by Henry Berry, who also has a street named after him in Liverpool. The dock was named after the reigning monarch King George III. The dock basin originally covered an area of slightly more than 3 acres and held scores of sailing ships. By the year 1900, George's Dock had been filled in to create what is now the Pier Head and the site for the Liverpool Docks offices, the Cunard Building and the Liver Building. A selection of the original George's Dock wall is still visible in the basement of the Cunard Building. This is the Simpson Fountain, named after William Simpson, a well-known character in the city known for his generosity. He owned a refreshment store on the landing stages of the ferries on the River Mersey. On a number of occasions, he placed a large bowl outside his cafe to collect money for charity. Because of the number of passengers using the ferries, he raised thousands of pounds, and his bowl became famous and was known as the Simpson Bowl. He was a teetotaler and ran his cafe as a temperance bar. He also tried to be elected as a Member of Parliament on a number of occasions, just being narrowly defeated. After his death, it was agreed to erect a memorial drinking fountain to him, being paid for by public subscription. The fountain was designed in a Gothic style by architect Mr. Thomas Cox. The Strand comes from the Anglo-Saxon word for shoreline or beach. When Liverpool was a hamlet surrounding the banks of the tidal pool, the Mersey would reach right up to this point. Because it has always been there as a path, it was not even named on original rough maps of Liverpool, but it is shown on the first accurate map published in 1725. Gorey is the name of the road heading out of Liverpool, on the side of the dual carriageway opposite the Strand. It takes its name from the Gorey warehouse that once stood between the two roads. The name of this road is a sinister reminder of the slave trade. As Liverpool expanded during the 18th century, with merchants growing wealthy from the slave trade, they named their warehouses after Gorey, which was a slaving trade island off the coast of Senegal in West Africa. The buildings were burned in 1802 but were rebuilt in 1811. Their huge hulk became incongruous near the Port of Liverpool building and the tunnel ventilation shaft. However, they remained standing until they were damaged in World War II and then were demolished. Lord Street is named after Carroll, the 3rd Viscount Molyneux. The Molyneux were some of the most prominent landed gentry in the area, dating back to the Norman conquest. Carroll Viscount Molyneux had a colourful story, and as a Catholic was not popular with everyone in Liverpool. He joined the Royalist army at the outbreak of the English Civil War, serving with his brother Richard in the Lancashire Regiment. Through almost all of the fighting from Manchester in 1642 to Worcester in 1651. After the death of his brother in 1654, he succeeded to the family title and became Constable of Liverpool Castle. As a well-known Catholic cavalier, he experienced harsh treatment from the victors and the family estates suffered. It was not until the reign of James II that Molyneux's fortunes improved. He was then appointed Lord Lieutenant of Lancashire and was one of the few who fought with any success on James's side against the Prince of Orange, seizing and holding Chester until all further resistance was in vain. Along with other Catholics, he was imprisoned in the Tower of London but was acquitted in 1694. After Viscount Molyneux's death at Croxteth in 1700, his title passed to his only surviving son, William IV Viscount Molyneux. Paradise Street is one of the most magical names on the map of Liverpool. Today it is literally a shopper's paradise at the heart of Liverpool 1. But its origins were more humble. The street follows the route of a stream that ran down from near the Birkenhead Tunnel entrance to the original muddy inlet known as the Liverpool. Its first name was Common Shore. Thomas Steers, the engineer who built the first Liverpool dock on the site of the pool, owned land on Common Shore, and he named the road leading to it Paradise Street, another of the same name in Rotherhithe, London, where he once lived. Narrow Argyle Street is named after Field Marshal John Campbell, 2nd Duke of Argyll, who died in 1743. He was a Scottish nobleman and senior commander in the British Army, serving in a number of campaigns. During the Jacobite Rebellion, he led the government army at the Battle of Sheriffmuir. He also served as Master General of the Ordnance, effectively Minister of War, under Britain's first Prime Minister, Robert Walpole. Close by is Kent Street, recently known as the site of a Liverpool City Council depot that used to sell off redundant lampposts and the like. It is named after Richard Kent, a merchant and shipowner, who in 1768 built himself a handsome house on the corner of Kent Street and Jute Street. Today this area is the home of fashionable warehouse conversions, including one of the old foundry and newly built blocks. But in the interwar years it was the site of Kent Gardens, a well-known block of masonettes that formed part of Liverpool's Chinatown. Colquitt Street is named after John Colquitt, who as a collector of customs and taxes lived on Hanover Street. The grounds of his house extended to what is now Berry Street, and the street built on his land was named after him. Colquitt had some notable descendants, including his grandson Samuel Martin Colquitt, who was tried for murder, following a duel with pistols in 1804. Together with another man, Colquitt was acquitted of the murder of Edward Grayson. In Colquitt Street stands the Grade II listed Royal Institution building, completed in 1799. It was built as the home of Thomas Parr, a Liverpool slave trader and banker, who also built an adjoining warehouse in Parr Street. Parr was famous for his boast that he had the handsomest house, wife and horse in Liverpool. Slater Street takes its name from Mr. Gill Slater. He was described as an eminent merchant who responded to a call to arms and raised the regiment of Liverpool Volunteers when Napoleon Bonaparte was threatening an invasion of Britain in 1766. Today, the Slater Street area is better remembered as the place where Liverpool's emergent nightclub and bar scene began to assert its influence in the 70s and 80s. Duke Street was once known just as the road to the quarry, since it led from the town to the old stone quarry, which is now the site of St James Cemetery next to the Anglican Cathedral. It was renamed Duke Street in honour of Prince William Augustus, Duke of Cumberland, who defeated Bonnie Prince Charlie in 1746 and came to be known as Butcher Cumberland. A son of George II and Queen Caroline, he became a military leader at a young age and commanded the government forces that defeated the Jacobites at the Battle of Culloden. The behaviour of his troops after the battle and the genocide of Highlander Jacobites that followed earned him the title of Butcher Cumberland, but he enjoyed great acclaim in London and Liverpool at the time. Cumberland was thwarted in his ambitions to rule England and died in London in 1765 at the age of 44. In the 19th century, Duke Street was a centre of commerce, and between the wars, the end at the top of the hill formed part of Chinatown. Today it has been reinvented as part of the Roadworks Quarter and is home to a range of upmarket restaurants and bars. Seal Street is another thoroughfare that took its name from the owner of the land on which it was laid out. Thomas Seal was a wealthy merchant who made his fortune in the Americas and was involved in the slave trade. He invested some of his wealth in Liverpool property, the best known of which was his own house in Hanover Street. In this drawing from the 19th century Seal's house, it's shown as the second in the picture, which is a view south-east side of Hanover Street from Seal Street to Bold Street. Today, Seal Street has been reinvented as the heart of Liverpool's clubland and was once voted the hippest street in Britain. This is Rumford Street. It was named after Count Rumford, Sir Benjamin Thompson. Several of his soup kitchens were set up in Liverpool, and one is said to have stood near Rumford Street. He fought on the side of the British in the American War of Independence, and in 1784 was knighted by King George III. A prolific designer, his Rumford fireplace improved heat output from coal fires and was adopted all over the world. Towards the end of his life, he moved to Bavaria, where he was appointed army minister and made account of the Holy Roman Empire. Nearby Rumford Place is also famous as the home of the unofficial US Confederate Embassy in Britain during the American Civil War. At the outbreak of war, the Northern Union fleet blockaded Confederate ports to prevent trade and supply of ammunitions of war. The Confederacy had no navy and proceeded to build one from Liverpool. The British government was officially neutral in this dispute, not recognising the Confederacy. Cotton importers Fraser Tenholme, whose office was in Rumford Place, acted as the unofficial Confederate embassy where operations were conducted. Commander Bullock of the Confederate Navy was based in Liverpool, and his prime task was to assemble and run a navy, and the Confederate warship Alabama was built in Birkenhead. Fenwick Street is named after the maiden name of Sir Edward More's wife Dorothy. She was the daughter of William Fenwick of Meldon Hall, Northumberland. Her husband Edward Moore of Bank Hall was a descendant of a family that owned much of the land on which Liverpool was built. A freeman of the city of Liverpool and an MP, Edward Moore died in 1604. Brunswick Street is another road that owes its name to the city's obsession with honouring the German royal house of Hanover, which provided George I as King of England in 1714. He was also the ruler of the Duchy of Brunswick-Luneburg in the Holy Roman Empire. From the mid-18th century, Brunswick Street became the centre of the banking industry in Liverpool. Hayward's Bank, built between 1798 and 1800 at 5 Brunswick Street, is the oldest purpose-built bank in the city. Tybarn Street owes its name to the Tybarn that was built there in 1514 by the Lord of the Manor. A member of the landed Molyneux family, it was Sir John Molyneux, High Sheriff of Lancashire. A tie barn was a type of barn used in the Middle Ages for storing rents and tithes. 1/10 a tithe of a farm's produce that was handed to the church and farmers, who then deposited their tithes in barns constructed for this purpose. William Pownall, a merchant and mayor in 1767, died of a chill caught while quelling a riot on Devil's Acre, near Salthouse Dock, during his year in office. The square is named after him. In 1973, the Dandy Pat fountain was moved to Pownall Square, but this turned out to be a poor move since it was badly vandalised. Dandy Pat was Patrick Byrne, an Irishman who arrived penniless in Liverpool in 1857 at the age of 17. He worked in the docks and bought his way into the licensed trade, owning the lavish Morning Star public house in Scotland Place. His nickname Dandy Pat was due to his ostentatious dress sense. A shrewd businessman, he also became an Irish nationalist member of the City Council and was a benefactor to many Catholic charities. We now look at a set of streets whose names have survived against the odds, since they could so easily have vanished when 19th century office blocks were built around them. Ormond Street is named after James, Duke of Ormond, who was a statesman during the reign of Queen Anne in the early 18th century. Edmund Street was originally Millhouse Lane. It was renamed by Sir Cleve Moore when he married his wife Anne Edmund around the same period. Bixtorf Street is named after Alderman Thomas Bixtorf, Mayor of Liverpool in 1701, who was complimented by the corporation for having paved the street in front of his house by his own hand. St Paul's Square is unrecognisable today from even 20 years ago. It takes its name from the imposing St Paul's Church, which was built there in 1769 on what was then known as the Dogfield. By 1900, the church had become desolate in a wilderness of warehouses, and the church was closed in 1901. The site of the church and churchyard was acquired by the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway Company to extend Exchange Station, but that never happened, and the building was not demolished until 1931. St Paul's Square then became home to Liverpool Stadium in 1932. It was the venue for countless boxing matches and pop concerts, and later strike meetings of Liverpool dockers. It was demolished in 1987. In the past decade, the site has been redeveloped and remodelled, breathing new life into the area and extending the city's business district. Prussia Street was named to commemorate the allegiance between England and Frederick the Great in the mid-18th century. The famous artist George Stubbs lived in a house on the corner of Prussia Street. When Exchange Station was built in 1850, many homes were demolished to make way, and Prussia Street was cut in half. The two parts still stand 300 yards apart. Great Crossall Street is said to take its name from a hall or building that was located near the site of Liverpool's Cross. This was a stone cross that stood in the middle of the road at the junction of what is now Tybarn Street. In the 1980s, Bob Parry, the then Labour MP for Scotland Exchange, campaigned for a search to be launched for the missing cross. Mr Parry, who was born in the area, told how local folklore held that when the cross was demolished or collapsed, it was buried on the side of the road near the spot. No real effort was made to locate the cross, and Mr Parry died in the year 2000 without his theory being put to test. Addison Street is now a road of semi-detached properties, built thanks to the efforts of the Liverpool Council in the 1980s when Derek Hatton was in control of housing policy. It was named after Joseph Addison, a poet, essayist and statesman who died in 1719. Addison Street was previously known as Sickman's Lane or Dead Man's Lace, a place where in times of plague, sufferers were isolated in cabins. A famous son of Addison Street in the 19th century was James William Carling, a noted Liverpool pavement artist. The son of poor Irish parents, from an early age James was known as the Little Drawer or the Little Chalker and used Liverpool street pavements for his art and to beg for money. Carling was well known because, unlike other pavement artists, he never did the same drawing twice. In 1871, he went to America and found real fame when he won an art competition staged by the magazine Harper's Bazaar. His success was to be short-lived. He returned to England with dreams of studying art school, but he died at the age of 29 in 1187 before he could realise his dream. This is Scotland Road, and what remains of the route that was once famous for having a pub on every street corner. It was originally a turnpike road, leading out to the route to Preston via Walton, Burscough and Maghull. In the 17th and 18th centuries, stagecoaches from Liverpool followed his route through Lancaster and Kendal to Scotland. In 1803, it was partly widened and streets of working-class housing laid out either side as Liverpool expanded. Scotland Road was at the centre of working-class life for the people of the surrounding Everton, Vauxhall and Islington areas near the North Liverpool docks and Liverpool city centre. The population in Victoria times was swelled by the arrival of thousands of Irish immigrants, many of whom had fled Ireland's Great Hunger. The area became known for having numerous Irish Catholic residents. The Liverpool, Scotland, UK Parliament constituency was represented by an Irish nationalist MP until 1929. Many houses in the area were demolished in the 1930s. And after World War II ended, many more residents were rehoused in new council houses in areas such as Croxteth, Kirby, Huyton, Norris Green and Stockbridge Village, leaving Scotland Road in a state of steady decline. Housing, churches and pubs were also cleared in the 1970s to make way for the second Mersey Tunnel. And it is a fact that there were once 200 public houses in the Scotland Road area, now only a few survive. But an area regeneration is underway with the £150 million Project Jennifer, which will see a supermarket, shops and homes built on a huge site between Scotland Road and Greater Homer Street. And it is hoped that the boost from Project Jennifer will also herald further improvement on the other side of Scotland Road. So it looks like Scotland Road will be one of the areas of Liverpool that is going to be transformed again beyond recognition. This is a lesson that we have learned in this series. Liverpool is ever changing. Past and present Liverpool never stands still. We hope you've enjoyed our look at some of the city's landmarks, and we look forward to bringing you another series in the future when we'll take a new look at the fascinating streets of Liverpool.